What up, though, y'all? What's good? Welcome to the What Up, Though show. It's your boy, Dame D, and I am back with another one. What's good, everybody? What's good? I'm getting ready to check my audio and video before we get tonight's conversation started. I see we got a few people in there watching this already. What's good to everybody? Getting ready to check to make sure you guys can hear me proper. Make sure you guys can hear me correct. Before we start tonight's conversation, and I'm not going to be long. I'm going to be short. I just was sitting here just browsing through YouTube, Facebook, and things like that, watching all the things that's been going on through the country. Especially all the racial things, this racial divide that we have with this Nolan Wells case, this Carmelo Anthony case, and then just all of the black young men and women that we've been seeing coming up hanging from trees and coming up drowned, and then the medical examiners has been ruling most of these cases that we see and that we've been seeing this year, accidental deaths, accidental drownings and things like that, and in the history, that we have here in the United States, it shows that, things like that don't go too well for us, so most blacks, man, we look at a lot of this shit that's been going on throughout the country, with our people coming up, like with this Nolan Wells situation. And we'll just stay with that and we'll get to the Carmelo Anthony case, in a second, but with the Nolan Wells case, man, it's in my lifetime, I've saw cover up after cover up after cover up, black men and women, innocent black men and women, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every black man and woman that's been murdered or killed or, has been innocent, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, and let me check my audio and video too, hold on. Make sure you guys can hear me. So let me check 1 2, check 1 2. Okay, so I'm talking. Hold on, guys. Just trying to make sure I can be heard. Okay, so I can be heard. Okay, so yeah, back to what I was saying. I'm just trying to make sure everything okay, so there we go. We definitely can be heard. So I just want to make sure you guys can hear me correctly. So yeah, back to what I was saying, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think I was talking about the Nolan Wells case in the situation. Most blacks, that look at this case, looks at it like, most of the cases that we've been seeing our entire lifetime. We've watched the Malice Greens, the Rodney Kings, we went to school hearing about the Emmett Tills and what's the Medgar Evers and things like that. So I don't understand it, and I wanted to name the title. Why wouldn't most white people want justice for blacks? That's what the title, originally was going to be, but Facebook wouldn't allow me to put that up, so I put this title up. So I might have to go back and change the title later. But it amuses me that most whites don't, and I'm not going to say most, I'll say most. It seems like most whites don't want justice here in the U.S. For blacks. And that's crazy to think that after the history that our ancestors went through and the history of what we've learned and what we saw what our ancestors went through, through the hands of our counterparts, so and this amuses me, the new generation of whites, like all this racism shit, it shouldn't really actually even exist. So that lets me know that, a lot of this stuff that we see, growing up with this new generation of whites, it's learned and taught behavior. Because let's just be honest, most blacks are not racist. We don't grow up with hatred towards anyone. Most blacks grew up in the church, and we were taught um, to treat to treat everyone, until they showed you otherwise, equally. So and I don't understand that, we've never really, in all my life living, really have never showed a true hatred, the way white people show their hatred towards us. And let's be honest about it. You will have some honest, true, good white folks that'll talk about it. And we've been seeing this recently throughout this Nolan Wells case and throughout a lot of cases that's been talked about this upcoming year. But it seemed like that most whites would want to see justice for blacks. Because let's just be honest, a lot of things that has went on, in the black community, and I'm just going to be honest. In my opinion, it's all been a setup and a disguise to to ruin. We all know, the black community, and we can go back and this is something that, me and Big Ken, we actually talked about that. I'm gonna be honest, and let's just talk about that. And I'll go all the way back to slavery. Blacks, we were coming out of slavery. We were some of the most honest, upstanding citizens around. We didn't know anything really about hatred, and that's the honest God truth. Most of those people were just trying to survive, trying to live, and trying to raise their family, and stay away from whites. It was most of the evil, crooked, devilish whites that were out there starting things and, showing their, let's just be honest, their evil side. What up, though, Jay Sanders? Yeah, I'm up a little late. I'm off tomorrow, so I'm just up talking. And then, the conversation, when I was just sitting here going through a few things, and I was just looking at, a lot of the cases that we see with this Nolan Wells case, a lot of cases that we learned in school with the Emmett Till, the Medgar Evers, and just all these lynchings and hangings that we've been seeing since our lifetime. And like I said earlier, the title should have been, why wouldn't most whites want justice for blacks in America? And that's the question, man. After all this shit that went on, throughout history, with our ancestors and just in our current time, watching the Rodney Kings, the Malice Greens, now Nolan Wells and things like that, why wouldn't most whites want to see justice for blacks? And you got to ask yourself that question. And reason why I asked that, like I said, I was just sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, all this shit that our ancestors have went through, all the shit that, we go through as blacks, being judged, racially judged, being, just racially profiled, with the police, and then just racial whites that we encounter. It seemed like most whites would want to see justice done for blacks, all the shit that we don't been through in this nation, in this country. And you got to ask yourself why. Why do they not want to see justice? It seemed like they will, want to see an equal playing field. They would want us to get the things that were promised to our ancestors. Because there were contracts that, I'm not going to say contracts, but there were agreements, that were done back in those times that pretty much were contracts. And this is what I was getting ready to say. Let's go back to the crack era, and I'll say allegedly, but we know blacks were not flying cocaine in that era. We know blacks were not doing anything. Did blacks indulge in things like that? But we know that crack era devastated devastated the black community. We lost hundreds, maybe even millions, through the violence of the crack era, through the police doing what they normally do to blacks, us killing each other, things like that. It was a horrible, and it was a setup. And I was, like I said, the crack era, the music that they ushered in right behind that, it totally changed the mindset of our people. We went from a group of people that, were pretty much just rock and roll and jazz and R&B. You know what I mean? And things like that. We didn't like rap and none of that shit existed. So they ushered this crack shit in. That crack shit ruined the community. Millions of fathers, young men were sent to prison. You had millions of mothers that was out here on crack, destroying their lives, their families, and things like that, man. And this was a deliberate job that was done by the government of the United States, allegedly. So we know this for a fact. This was done deliberately. Like I said, the crack era, the music era, and we'll get on to the music. The music two combined. We know music is the number one most influential thing on this planet. And they allow, these record companies allow, I'm not going to say they allowed, they took the music that we originally listened to, like jazz, country, rock and roll, would had a message, somewhat, mostly a positive message to it. I'm not going to say, back in those times they didn't talk sexually and say sexual things, during those times, because they did, and we know that, but at those times, we didn't hear any, the music back then was not vulgar. We didn't hear men degrading women. And then now you have women degrading women, women degrading men, things like that. So music alone, and then like I said, when the crack era and then the music era, like I said, when this gangster rap came in, it took and music, and they know this. Music is the number one most influential thing on this planet. Music will capture your mind, like how when you were a kid and you're watching cartoons and all that, you're portraying it through. Music is just the same, even more, more compelling to attract your brain and your mind, and that's exactly what what gangster rap did, that genre of music did, to a group of people. It destroyed and changed the mindsets, of what we knew from a people, and it was designed that way. Why would record companies, usher in some bullshit like that? You know what I mean? It totally destroyed the mindset of blacks. It did not affect the whites at all. And what was so crazy about that? And and this is, and most people probably really don't even look at shit like this, James. Most whites buy more black music and listen to black music than blacks do. They support black rappers and things like that, but it did not destroy the white community and the mindset like how it did the black community, and why is that? So, with the whole crack era, how that destroyed and demolished the black community, and it had no effect on the white community. It didn't even touch the white community. You got to ask yourself that question. Why is that? What up though, James, man? Look, I'm kicking some facts. We need to have more people in here. I'm gonna stop until we get a few more people in here, man. I'm sitting up here really kicking facts, and I think the only people I see in here is my boy James Sanders, man. But even still, it's all good because the message is getting out here and it's getting across. But the crack era, man, it totally demolished a community, worldwide. And that's crazy. It wasn't just like in one section like New York, or Detroit or something like that. It was worldwide. This shit was planned. It was deliberate. And that's probably why this shit ain't getting out. Because this is a great conversation and great talk. And we're gonna make sure we continue and we see what's going on. That's crazy, that YouTube and Facebook may not be letting this message get out, because normally around this time it's a lot more people, watching the show. So, but yeah, man, you got to ask yourself, why wouldn't most whites and most people want to see justice for blacks here in America? All the bullshit that, our ancestors went through, and all the bullshit that we've been through since, we've been living in this lifetime. I'm 51 years old, and I saw a lot of injustice go on in the black community, through the court system, through the police system, through these drugs, through this music, and it's only affected one fucking group of people. And don't nobody seem to understand or care about this. So like I said, James, and hopefully you're still there, James. But like I said, I should have a lot more people listen to this conversation because this is a great topic. This is a great discussion to have. So, and this needs to be talked about. And reason why I say this, this needs to be talked about more, and we're going to definitely talk about this more. This was a conversation that, me and my big bro were having, because we both think deep. We kind of like on the same, wave of thinking, and most of us need to be on this level, man. We got to start thinking out of the box. Yeah, man, I'm glad you're still there, man. This is a conversation that we should have hundreds of people. I don't had so many racist whites in my, James, I don't know if we Facebook friends or not, but I don't had so many racist whites, over, putting out a story about a young black man that was hung. And it seems like these motherfuckers, they love to hear, when something horrible has happened to a black man or a woman, and I just don't understand that. That's why I'm having this conversation, man. It's not just, this is some learned fucking taught behavior, and this is some sick shit, that's been going on since our lifetime. So why wouldn't these motherfuckers want justice for us? It's kind of, you got to think about it. Like I said, with the crack era, they ushered in the drugs. They destroyed, communities worldwide, countrywide. It was just not in one city. This shit was all in every fucking state that blacks were in. It basically devastated most communities. So, and this was the conversation, like I said, me and Big Ken, we were talking about, some months ago. And I'm like, man, when you really think about this shit, when you really think about it, James, this shit was deliberately done from the fucking crack, to the music, and there's something that needs to be fucking done about that because we can actually prove this shit. There need to be a group of black lawyers trying to get together to come up with some type of plan to introduce to the fucking government, to try to, get compensated for this, because this was a deliberate fucking plan. And these motherfuckers can go back years and indict and do all type of stuff, to other people, but when you think about what happened, to our people back in that, and this just goes back to the 80s. They deliberately changed the mindset, of a group of people, like I said, and I'll take it back deeper than that, man. Like when you think about it, man, black folks were the most were the most, let me think about this. We were the most upstanding citizens, coming out of slavery. Blacks did nothing, to try to get in trouble, meaning that, what their ancestors and what their forefathers had went through. So we were some of the most upstanding people, out there just trying to work, trying to live, and trying to take care of our families, and trying to build, but it was another group of people which were white, that did not like that were trying that had pure hatred. Put it that way. We're just going to keep it real. They had nothing but pure hatred for those people back in those times. And you got to ask yourself, man, most of those motherfuckers are dead. And we still today have this same sickness through America. And it's crazy, and I was just sitting here thinking about that, and I really did not want to be long, man, but it's deep when you really think about that, and it's sickening to think that most whites would not want justice for blacks here in America. And James Sanders made a comment. He said, "Why is Mississippi the easiest target? Those black people won't fight back." I'm gonna keep it real, man. Most blacks, especially in those towns back in those days, were scared to fight back. We had no police, we had no protection. Most of those people, and I believe, and I'm gonna put this story out there. Most of those people lost their lives, they lost their businesses, they lost their homes trying to fucking fight back. That's why most of us were docile and didn't fight back in those times, because those were the times where the KKK were prevalent. They were burning down churches, homes, killing people, hanging motherfuckers, and things like that. That's crazy. You never heard of a black group of people dressed up, riding around looking for white people to start shit with, looking to try to do harm to whites. That's crazy. That's sick when you think about this shit, what has been done to our people. And they wonder why, we have the attitude, and we have why we are like how we are towards, most whites. Because I'm not going to say all, because I do have, a lot of white friends that's true, and that's honest, and that's sincere. It's the ones that's not, and then and I'm gonna be honest, it's the ones that, and I've even checked some of my white friends, it's the ones that don't speak up about this shit. You see this shit, you see what the fuck is going on, but let's get back to, like I said, most blacks, man, coming out of that slavery time were upstanding citizen, hard-working men, honest men. Most of those men were God-fearing men, believed in a Jesus that that the white man taught them and forced them to believe. So most of those people back in those days were docile. They didn't want to fight. They just wanted to live and take care of their families, man. And they were up against a bunch of fucking devils. When you think about that shit is sickening, man. And white people got to realize this shit. And I'm gonna keep talking about this shit every day because it's some sick shit to think that these motherfuckers, excuse me, I normally don't talk like this, but this brings out the, this does something to me to think that, and this comes from a comment, a lot of this is coming from, I did a video about a young black man that was found hung. You had a lot of white people come into the comment, making comments, horrible racist comments, and I'm like, why the fuck, wouldn't most people, and like I said, most whites, why wouldn't most whites want justice here for blacks in America with all these hangings, all these lynchings, these drownings, these suspect fucking killings and murders, especially down in Mississippi. James, it's horrible. And I'm gonna read out another comment James Sanders said. He said, I heard that they were in Louisiana and Arkansas too. Coward to the white man. Yeah, man. But back to what I was saying, man, and you hit it right on the nose, man. A bunch of fucking cowards back in those times, and even to this day, I don't understand what the hatred is towards blacks. This is some learned taught fucking behavior. Because like I said, coming out of slavery, most blacks were hard working, God-fearing men and women, that did not want no smoke, did not want no static with whites, because they knew, that if they had any smoke or static, it was a chance that they were going to lose everything that they had, including their lives, their businesses, their families, so most blacks kept their head down, went to work, took care of their families, and that was it, man. And we were able to build. We built businesses. We were growing. It was white America who took that shit away from us, who destroyed the mindset of the black man and the woman. And that shit came through the fucking drugs, through the 80s, and then it came through the music right after that. Totally destroyed the mindset of most blacks in America, and it's crazy to me to see that most whites here in America would not want fucking justice. And like I said, we need to have a group of fucking lawyers getting together, putting something together to see that this was a fucking plan. A planned thing, because it was not in one city. This shit hit the motherfucking country like a fucking tornado, like a tsunami. Crack wiped out most men, most black men, young men was locked up, went to jail. Millions were killed. Millions were locked up. Millions of women were killed. Millions of women were on drugs. Millions of kids were just put to the wayside, that we lost, and none of this shit affected white suburbia, none of the white neighborhoods at all. They were able to prosper off it while we were going through this shit. Think about this shit. When you really think about this shit, most, and I'm not going to say all, but most of these motherfuckers don't want justice or want to see blacks do good or be on the same playing level as them. They want to see most blacks beneath them. They want to see us be servants to them. They don't want to see a change. Most whites fought against that shit back during the Civil War. So why would whites want to share or give up their fucking power to blacks? And that's what we need to understand. That's what's going on in this. That's what's going on down in Mississippi. White folks are flexing their motherfucking power. From the governor on down to the sheriff, to the medical examiner. So we have to understand, and I hope this family understand, it's a chance that they made. And luckily, and I want to say, and I want to give a shout out to all the podcasters out there that's been keeping these stories alive. We got to do this shit, because they thought that we was going to forget about this shit. They thought we was going to watch it and forget about it and sweep it up under the rugs in a few days. That's what they thought, but they were wrong. Willie D, Taylor Publishing House, I talked about it, millions, thousands of black podcasters and even some white podcasters kept these stories alive, kept this Nolan Wills case alive, because if not, this would have been one of the cases that medical examiner down there in Mississippi would have swept up under the rug. She probably would have labeled this shit a motherfucking accidental drowning. They think we stupid. They gotta think that we're stupid. Listen, the same fucking play has been run over and over and over and since my lifetime. And what's so crazy, man, our churches, and I don't even want to get on that, but we need to be building in a different way. We building in the wrong way, man. We've been up against a fight that, I'm not going to say that we can't win, but on the route and the pace that we are, man, the way that they issued the drugs in, the way that the music has changed the mindset of the men. Now, even the women think that most of the women think they fucking men. They talk like they're men. I'm going to read a comment. James Sanders said they are terrified and declining and becoming a minority. Listen, we don't want to talk about that. That's another conversation that, that we really need to talk about. Why whites, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Why whites have hatred towards blacks. Do you know why, James? And I'm going to break it down. Have you heard of Francis Cress Wilson, she broke it down to the T. Why whites fear blacks. And I'll break it down a little bit because I really don't want to talk about that because I'm actually going to do a story on that, but yeah, you know what? I won't get off into that. That was a story that me and Big Ken are going to break down. You know, why the hatred that whites have for blacks. Because it's a true hatred. And I understand why. And once most of blacks understand why, we'll understand the mindset of whites. Which I do understand. I know what the fuck is going on. I understand why so much hatred, and I just want to ask, the slavery shit. How they always talk about slavery is over. Get over that shit. Get over it. We didn't do this to your ancestors. We didn't do this to you. It was our ancestors. But you motherfuckers still benefit from what your ancestors did. I'm not going to say all, because all don't. I have some true good white friends that's true, because one of my white friends, I did a story about white privilege. He was like, he's white. He like, what they passing this white privilege out? I said, you know what, bro? I said, you get it, but you don't even know it. That's how white privilege work, but what's going on down in Mississippi is they're flexing their white privilege and their power. When you have power, you can flex that shit. And that's what's going on. That's why this shit has been covered up from, and I'm gonna say allegedly, from the governor's office. Why would the governor make a fucking comment on this case that he had no clue what the fuck was going on? The reason why is he's trying, and these motherfuckers are slick. We have to really realize what's going on, what's been going on through the jury, how through the media. When he came out and said that shit, this motherfucker was trying to he was trying to get into the minds of the potential jurors that's getting the jurors that's going to be on this fucking trial. Did nothing go on. It was an accidental drowning. These are the games that these motherfuckers play with us. So by him saying that, he was putting these motherfuckers on code. They all go by code, y'all. And we got to start going by code too. At one point in time we did. A lot of stuff that we used to do that benefit us, we've gotten away from it. But yeah, man, all he was doing was putting everybody on the code from top. He's the top motherfucker besides the senator, there. He runs the state. So when he came in and made that comment, it just put all them on code. That's why none of them motherfuckers are really talking about, what happened to that young man. This is what's been going on throughout my lifetime, throughout our lifetime here in America. We see what the fuck went on with our ancestors. So why the fuck y'all think these motherfuckers gonna change? Not all, but most, and then the most make it bad for everybody. Because what's so crazy is, y'all don't speak up about it. Y'all see what the fuck been going on since the beginning of time. And don't nobody want no justice for us. That's fucked up. You can't, man. James Sanders made a comment. He said, watch out, Dame D. Don't even trust some of the so-called good ones. You see what the fuck happened to Nolan. But and I'm gonna go back to what I was saying, man. Most blacks, like I said, came out of slavery. The only hatred we had towards them is what the fuck they had really did to our ancestors, and I'll speak for, for people that's my age and younger. Most of our parents raised us not to hate nobody, not to hate no fucking whites. It's these motherfuckers who teach their children to hate us. What up, though, Q Jackson? Quincy Jackson said we ain't nothing but high-priced slaves. Listen, we're nothing more than let me get the word. We generate the economy for them. But yeah. And you said high-priced slaves. Yeah, I agree with that too. But yeah, man, you gotta ask yourself this question. Why wouldn't most white people want justice for blacks? And you got to ask yourself that question. And you got to, once you ask yourself that question and you see what's been going on through history, it lets you know that it's always going to be a racial divide. We're not going to be treated equally in the justice system at all. This system was not set up for blacks when they originally put all these laws and all these laws in effect. We were not included in this shit. This shit was for them to be able to capitalize on us. And we don't realize that shit. That's why we get unequal treatment in the justice system. I talked about this at work, man. We got to start voting, y'all. We got to start getting on these juries. That's what the fuck happened to Carmelo Anthony. We did not have enough people that looked like us on this jury, and we allowed that young man to go up there and be railroaded. So this time in the second trial, hopefully this young man will get a second trial, but we have to do a better job. They're beating us at a game. This shit is a game, y'all. Race is the whole word race is who's going to win the race, who's going to be on top. And right now, they're winning. Quincy Jackson made a comment. He said, all laws were made for us. All laws, right. I agree. All laws were made to go against us. Yeah. And that's the true nature of it. Do some of they people fall up under the laws that hit us? Yes. But even when they go through the justice system, nigga, they get slaps on the motherfucking wrist. Let's talk about a case that we were just talking about with this Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony stabbed a white boy because he was defending himself, is what he said. I just talked about a case where you had a white girl, and I'm going to bring up, I even have the video that I can show you guys. It was a white woman, and this case happened 4 years ago, but she was just sentenced. It was a white OnlyFans model who had a black boyfriend, stabbed him to death. Do you know this bitch is getting ready to walk away with less than 10 years, and she already got time served, so it'll be less than that. But you see how like I said, the justice system works for blacks. We have two different justice systems here in America. One for whites, one for blacks. It's not, the scale is not equal. That motherfucker is off balance. We've been lied to about a lot of shit that we think is true. I won't get off into a lot of that stuff today. I just wanted to come in for a second, man. Ask you guys this question. Q-Dog, why do you think most white folks don't want justice for blacks in America? Oh, and I haven't even told you guys my thought on why whites don't want justice for blacks here in America. That's going to always be a racial divide. There's always going to be a war. Whites make money off this fucking racial divide. And I'm going to go ahead and give you my, we've been on here for 38 minutes. I said I wasn't going to be long. Listen, I'm going to give you my theory. And like I said, Frances Cress Wilson talked about it brilliantly. And I can't speak it up no better, but she talked about this. She talked about blacks have the power to annihilate whites without even laying a hand on them. And do you guys know how? That's a question that I'm asking to you guys in the comment. I'm asking to everybody in the comment. We can wipe out white men, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, and you guys can comment later. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to answer my question. How can we take out whites without laying a hand on them? This is, and the question to this is the question is actually the answer to why most whites don't want justice for blacks in America. And it's going to be a conversation that we're going to talk about. This is going to lead into the conversation that I want to have. Look, I should have had more people in on this conversation, especially black people. I know it's late. I'm off tomorrow. I'm going to probably come back and have the same motherfucking conversation because this was a great conversation. Make sure y'all guys share this. I need for y'all to like and share this. Please like and share, Quincy. Please make sure y'all like and share James Sanders, because I spoke from the heart today. I spoke from the truth, but it's been 20 seconds. I gave y'all the real reason why blacks don't want justice for us in America, and the real reason why most whites hate blacks, and why it's always going to be a racial divide. And the real reason is why blacks can take out whites without laying a hand on them by sleeping with their women. All we have to do is sleep with their women and not allow them to be with their women. Whites, men would disappear overnight. And that's why you have a racial divide, because whites know it, the scientists know it, the DNA speaks for itself. We have the power to be able to wipe out whites without, all we have to do is sleep with their men and they will disappear. That's why whites are in fear. They've already calculated the time and date that which whites are the minority in this world. They just make us think that we are the minorities. They already are the minorities, but they will be minority. I believe that they have it already written down by 2040, meaning that, this country will be pretty much ran by Mexicans, and minorities, which a lot of Mexicans have all that. That's why the fuck they've been deporting and getting rid of these Mexicans like a motherfucker, because they're trying to equal. They're trying to get rid of the competition. That's what whites, listen, whites will never give up their power. All this shit is about power. Who's winning the race? And right now, they're winning the race. They will never release their power. Listen, they will blow this motherfucker up before they get rid of, before they will release their power to any race. James Sanders made a comment. He said, why is that, Dan B, sleeping with their women? Because, like I said, black people, we have the ability, listen, when blacks, you should know this, James, when blacks sleep with whites, what color do the child come out? It come out black, not white. So in a period of time, because study shows this, and I won't get back to the studies. We'll talk about that at another time. But when a black man sleep with a white woman, the child comes out black. It 50-50, but the child has more black DNA in them. So over time, if that child keeps breeding with a black person, it'll continue to be black. That's what I mean. So whites know that. That's why whites do not want their women. Okay, put it this way: if we were just getting along good, mingling with each other, whites would disappear. If we started sleeping with their women by the fucking millions at one point, white men will disappear. And that's what they're afraid of. You can't, when white men sleep with black women, the baby still come out black. That's the power of the chosen people. And they know this shit. Only we can do this shit. Only black people can sleep with a different race or a different race, and that baby will come out looking have more black DNA in it than any other fucking race, and they know this. So back to what I was saying, look up Frances Cress Welsing. She spoke about this. What do you think the national monument is in Washington? It's the phallus. It's the penis of the phallus of the black man standing up, strong and tall, baby. They give you symbols and they put shit up. But it's up to you to go and research and learn the knowledge of what's been going on here in America. So like I said, man, that's why whites, that's why we have a racial divide. Blacks didn't come up with the word race and white and black. It was whites who marked that shit up. And we'll talk about the whole thing. And this will be another story. About whites wanting to keep their power, and how pretty much how the dominant high class white has turned to, the lower class whites and against us too. And they don't realize that they're in the fucking same playing field as us. The motherfuckers who actually run and rule this shit came up with a fucking plan like, look, we don't want these motherfuckers taking our shit. We got to come up with a plan to keep these motherfuckers beneath us. And the plan that they came up was fucking brilliant, and it's been working, and we've been allowing for this shit to work. But my job as I go on, man, I'm going to listen. I really don't, a lot of people get offended when you start talking the truth. Many of our people has died for talking the truth and trying to inform our people about, what's really going on, about true knowledge. Because once you learn true knowledge and knowledge itself, a lot of this shit that you know and you learn, you'll be looking like, how the fuck could I be fooled for this fucking long? These motherfuckers has captured, listen, I don't knock anybody for religion or any of that. Whatever makes you a great woman or a man, do that. But what religion has done, it has captured the mind state of our women and men and made us docile. Because listen, being docile, you're not going to conquer shit at all. Listen, white people, these same motherfuckers that gave you religion and Jesus and all that, look, it's the same motherfuckers that's killing your ass and that's been killing your ass. And that's the truth of and the fact of how all this shit works. So yeah, like I said, man, I didn't even expect to be in here this long, but this is deep, James. And I'm gonna keep it going for a little bit. James Sanders made a comment. He said, "We are the only people that can create other races." Yes, we are. We are the only. Listen, every race comes from fucking black. Black can make any color. You have black people with fucking blind and blue eyes. Do you know that? So listen, man, we've been fooled about a lot of stuff. Like I said, most blacks that has come along the way, that has learned knowledge itself and tried to speak this shit and speak the truth to power and speak this shit, because they say every 40 years there'll be a black messiah that will come along and uplift and try to change the mindset of the blacks. Listen, every time that happens, guess what happens? They wipe that nigga out. Because they know, listen, black folks are the most dominant race on this fucking planet. And we can prove this by fucking sports. Who's the most fucking dominant, fastest, biggest motherfuckers out there? Basketball, football, and even baseball. Listen, even in hockey, if blacks started playing hockey, we would take that fucking sport overnight. We're the most fucking dominant, and they know this shit. Why do you think listen, it's a lot of countries out here that don't even carry guns with their police. Why do you think these motherfuckers came up with the guns? That the gun is the great Frances Quest. Listen, you guys go look her up. Frances Cress Welsing, she spoke about it. The gun is the great equalizer to the black man. Without the gun, they couldn't do shit with you. We are dominant. They need that fucking gun. That's why they coming up. That's why they're always coming up with new ideas every day with weapons, guns, fucking tasers. Now they got gloves. I'm going to do a story about that. They got gloves where they were going to be trying to be in the schools using this shit on kids. But the TYT spoke about this shit. The Young Turks, Dr. Richie, they spoke on this. These motherfuckers were going to have electric gloves shocking your motherfucking kids. And actually, that's what they're going to be doing. And that was, they trying to put this shit in effect. Us as a group of people, man, we have to really fucking wake up. Listen, our minds has been captured, and they're brilliant at what they did. Quincy Jackson made a comment. He said there are like 4% of black people in baseball. Now, yeah, listen, we dominate in everything that we fucking do, and they know this shit. That's why they stop us from entering a lot of these fucking venues. and businesses and things like that, you know, because once we start learning shit and once we get into shit, we gonna learn shit, you know, even back in the slavery days, you know, that's why they didn't want niggas to read, you know, or be talking to each other, because once they knew once niggas got to, you know, listening and shit, you know, you had that slave, that nigga was listening and shit, you know, learning how these motherfuckers do, you know, and, you know, he was able to, you know, take that information back, you know, to his people, man. You know, just you know, but it's always gonna be, and that's gonna be another conversation, man. But it's deep, man. We listen. We really have to wake up, people. You know, and Mississippi should be showing us why we need to be fucking waking up. These motherfuckers we allow allegedly. You know, go and look at the record of the medical examiner down there. This bitch, she's been mislabeling cases for fucking years. You know, black folks been coming up dead. The family's been, you know, saying, you know, she been labeling shit accidental, you know, motherfuckers hanging themselves. I mean, not hanging themselves, but, you know, suicides and things like that. You know what I mean? Mislabeling cases, and families been talking about that. Like, he wasn't even fucking suicidal. He had his whole life. You know, and most of these cases that she's been mislabeling, these cases has something to do with a fucking white man. So we got to realize, man, it's all about power. You know, we got to stop being stupid. I'm just gonna keep it real. You know, and we got to start holding some of these motherfuckers who sitting in high places, our people, you know, for not really, you know, keeping being keeping it real with us. You know, these motherfuckers getting checks and ain't really doing shit, you know, for the people. You know, so we got to start fucking voting. That's what the fuck happened to Nolan. It wasn't enough niggas run away from the goddamn, niggas hide from jury duty. We got to stop that shit. That shit is hurting us as a fucking community, and they know that shit. Hate that shit. Start fucking voting. You know, start being on the jury duty. That's how that's why niggas is getting 30 years for bullshit that they get 5 years for. You know, we get 30 years to they 5. What kind of shit is that? What kind of fucking justice system is we living in? You know, and that shit been going on for a long motherfucking time, you know, and a lot of our people, like I said, that's sitting in high places, judges and shit like that, they've been allowing this shit to go on because they getting motherfucking checks and they getting paid to shut the fuck up. You know, that's the power that these white folks have over us. That money is a motherfucker. You know, and these niggas sitting in high places and they ain't doing shit, getting paid. You know, so we got to start taking justice into our own motherfucking hands is what we got to start doing as a group and as a race. Quincy Jackson, I'm about to send you an invite, Q-Nitty. Let's bring you on in, my dog. I'm about to send you an invite right now, man. I didn't think I was going to be long, but you know what, man? I'm going to go in there and preach this fucking sermon because somebody got to talk about that shit. But you know what, man? That's the real James Sanders, man. You know, and like I said, this was a conversation that I was having with my brother, Big Hen. You know, Big Hen, man, you got to get that podcast off the show, off the flow, bro. You know, but we got to start being real with our people, man. Fuck that. You know, most of our people, you know, like I said, back since the slavery days, been some docile, you know, and I'm not going to say docile because we got a lot of people that has paved the way, you know, for where we are as a group now, you know, and I'm going to keep it real. We got a lot of great blacks that have done a lot of great things, you know, and have opened up a lot of doors. But, you know, it should be way more than what the fuck it is. You know, so we got to wake up as a group of people. We got to see what the fuck is going on. We see what the fuck going on in Mississippi. All these niggas ain't hanging their motherfucking selves, and I get it. You know, sometimes, listen, and only time, in my opinion, the only time where you should have a black motherfucker hanging themselves, and you should never have a black motherfucker hanging themselves due to the fucking history of what happened to our ancestors. You know, but in my opinion, the only time that you'll get a black person hanging themselves is, you know, it's going to be a mental illness situation behind it. What black motherfucker gonna hang themselves knowing what the fuck what was going on to our peoples? That's crazy. That's crazy to think that shit. And these white people, most of these white people think this shit. They think that we out here hanging ourselves. You know, like I said, I did a story the other day. This motherfucker had over 400 and something comments, you know, which, you know, I did the story and come to find out, The young man may have fucking done this to himself, but release the motherfucking story so we can see this shit, because I'm gonna be real. I don't trust shit these motherfuckers say. Why would y'all trust anything these motherfuckers say? They do any and everything to keep their fucking power. It's about power. James Sanders made a comment. He said they are secretly trying to bring, they not secretly trying to do shit. They don't brought that shit back, James. That shit is back. Nigga, they up probably. You know how these young motherfuckers said we up 24-6? They up 1,000, they up 1,000,000 to nothing. They up. That Jim Crow shit ain't never went nowhere. They just took that shit off the books. A lot of this shit that went on back in the days that was on record and on the books, that shit was just taken off the books, but that shit still goes on and exists, and we see it through the fucking law system, through the justice system. Let me ask y'all this question. If you had a group of niggas going through the suburbs, through white neighborhoods, jumping out on white kids, shooting them in the back of the fucking head, what do you think will fucking happen? I'm gonna wait until to one of y'all answer that question. If you had black police officers in white neighborhoods jumping on white women and white boys, white kids, shooting them in the back of the fucking head, beating white women down, knocking them the fuck out, what the fuck y'all think will happen? So why the fuck is this shit happening in our neighborhoods? Every white motherfucking officer that do that shit need his ass whooped. That's some fuck shit, and the justice system allows this fuck shit that's been going on. It was just an incident where you had a black woman, young 18-year-old woman, the officer beat the shit out of her. But we allowing this shit to happen. These motherfuckers not scared of us, because they got that great equalizer. And that's what it's about, man. Like I said, if you guys are not familiar with Frances Cress Welsing, go look her up, man. She has a great book, and I forget the name of the book right now, but I'll come back. But yeah, man, we're gonna have more of these talks like this. This is some shit that we need. The black community need more fucking straight up honest talks like that. Because right now we fucking losing. We give more fuck about sports than anything. We give more about sports than our equal justice here in America. We pay attention to that bullshit. I don't even give a fuck about that shit no more. We give a fuck about that shit more than anything, and they know this shit. We give a fuck about entertainment, sports. What else? What is it? Entertainment, sports, and I'll think of something else. But we give a fuck about more than that shit than trying to equal the playing fucking field. And they know this shit. Most niggas on Sundays, on the weekends, is watching sports and shit versus fucking trying to build for their motherfucking families or trying to help the next brother man trying to build up some shit. That's the mindset that we had coming out of slavery. We were some builders. We were some thinkers, and we were builders. We were trying to think of a better way, trying to equal the playing field, and they got us out of that fucking mindset with this crack and this fucking music. Only thing you listen, our youth, they know a motherfucking rap song before they can even spell their whole motherfucking name. And the mindset of our women, oh my God. The mindset of our women compared to any other race of women is horrible. And I'm not gonna say our men is any better, but it starts with the women, because the women are the nurturers. They bring life into this world. So you have to start with the fucking women. And our women, when you think about it, it's fucking horrible. Our women give more fucking about their nails, these fucking lashes, their hair, than fucking building or trying to create equal opportunity for our people. We fucked up the mindset. It's the mindset. No other race of people, no other race of women, of people fucking give that much fuck about their hair, nails, and lashes and shit like that. We spend billions on that bullshit. Yeah, so I think if we change the mindset, and I think it will it happen in my lifetime? I, I don't I don't know. I think we have a great possibility to change the mindset, but we've allowed ourselves to fall prey to the and I'm gonna keep it real, to our Mexican Latino brothers and sisters, because at one point we were number two. We've had failed behind the Mexicans. The white race does not really even look to us. They go to the Mexican now. That's what a lot of us really don't realize. The Mexican has surpassed us up as a grace, as a group in the race. Yeah. And let me go back to some of these comments. I've been talking a lot, y'all. I think I'm kicking some knowledge. Give me a thumbs up. I need for you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'm gonna go back to James Sanders made a comment. He said they will be unalive long before. Here, let me highlight that. I don't have my glasses on. Let me go into I need something to drink. I've been talking. I need y'all to interact more with your boy. I've been up here spitting some facts. Okay, let me go back to your comments, James. But yeah, man, we got to do better as a grape, hold on, James. I'm about to read your comment. James said black women have destroyed the black community. Hold on. Yes, they have. And I'm not going to say they have single-handedly, because they have done it side by side with the black man. But in this day and age of time, the black woman, I'm not going to say she's ruling, but she has surpassed, the black man far as, you know, educational wise, far as sitting in, high places and things like that. The black woman has come a long way, but I'm gonna keep it real. Sometimes black woman is the right hand to white supremacy. They do a lot of keeping us down too. There are, and that's real talk. We can talk. That's another conversation. James Sanders made a comment. He said, "Black women have destroyed the." Okay, I read that one on. Yes, but yeah, they are the right hand to white supremacy. But at the end of the day, guys, it's all about domination and power. That's where you get to. Most people probably don't even know this, but that's where you get the word race from. White men came up with that word. That was a way of dividing, all groups of people, all races, so and the whole thing, race is what group of race is going to people is going to win the race, I should say. Right now, white America, white folks are dominating the race. But at one point we dominated for dynasties, which we read about and things like that in books and shit like that. But we got to get back to dominating, if we were kings and queens, like how we see on the from studying on the walls and hieroglyphics and things like that. If we once were kings and queens and, had colleges and were great thinkers and things like that, we got to get back to that mindset, because we know who we are. We know that we are the chosen ones. We know everything comes through us. We know this, and this is something we got to really, that we have to really, address. We are the chosen one. Every time a white person comes out of the house, the sun is trying to kill their ass. That's why they got to put on fucking sunblock and things like that. Don't get me wrong. Now they have adapted to the sun and things like that. Especially the whites that's over in Africa and things like that. But when they come outside, the sun is literally trying to attack their ass. It's trying to kill them, I should say. Trying to give them skin cancer. We don't have that problem. We have melanin. Natural people. You get what I'm saying? Natural people have melanin in them. That's another conversation that we're going to have. Don't get me wrong. at the end of the day, it's a human race. That's what it should be. It should be we should be humans. It shouldn't be races where you have division. The white man has done that. To be able to capitalize and to be able to continue to keep the power that he has. So he'll come up with this division of separating all groups of races, which we all just should be the human race. But this goes back to what I was saying, James. If we were just all a human race and we were getting along and mingling, motherfuckers would start disappearing. And that's what the white man know. If white women were mingling around with black men like more than what they are, and they know this shit. That's why they try to separate. That's why they hate to see their women with our men, because they know if white women stop sleeping with white men, they would disappear. Literally. Within 10 years, probably. I'm not going to put a time limit on it, but they know this. James Sanders made another comment. He said, "Oh wow, I heard another former YouTuber say that black women are the right hand of white." That's a fact. Black women, in these times, are the right hand to white supremacy. And we can talk about a lot of the stuff. A lot of this stuff has come out. And I try to not talk about a lot of this stuff, but I'm getting ready to go that route, I think. But yeah, a lot of this stuff has come back. A lot of this stuff has come out of the and I'm forgetting the word, the white women, what's the act that they passed back in the 60s? The lesbians, I forget the act. But the Free Rights Act, they wanted black women to join in on this bullshit, and the black women, pretty much decided to go, and side up, with these white women. And the word will come to me in a second, but it'll come to me in a second. But yeah, that's where all this shit started from. They wanted equal rights. Yeah, the biracial thing, but it's actual word for that. It'll come to me in a second. But yeah, they wanted white women wanted. Listen, the whole thing is black women didn't mind being a staying-at-home moms and things like that. It was the white women who fucking wanted equal rights of the same rights that white men wanted, because white men would fucking beat, do all type of crazy shit, killing them and doing all type of shit. They wanted equal rights. They wanted their own shit. Our women didn't have a problem with our men going out being the workhorse. You know what I mean? They had no problem. See, and this is where, like I said, we were beating them at. Our women were stay-at-home moms. The men were going out there working. We were builders. We can talk about Black Wall Street. That's why that shit was destroyed. They didn't want niggas thinking like Black Wall Street no more. Niggas, we had outgrew them at one point. We had outbuilt them, outgrew them. And they knew that shit. They destroyed that shit. Listen, anything that we can accomplish that will outdo them or accomplish them or show that, that we're a dominant group of people or anything that we do, that they're going to destroy that shit. And that's what happened, in past history. And that's what's happening in present history at this time now. But it happens through different forms and different ways, and right now what we're getting beaten at is through the justice system and the court system. And we have to do a better job at Q-Dog. We need to start, and hopefully, my son, I got a little one. I want him to be a judge or a lawyer, something that's going to help our people out. Fuck trying to be a baseball player, a football player, an athlete. Fuck that shit. That shit ain't doing us nothing, but making them niggas rich. We need to put some niggas, in some high seats it'll benefit everybody. That's what we need. Yeah. But Q-Dog, man, I love the conversation that you had the other day. If you're still listening, keep it going, man. James Sanders made a comment. He said there won't be no more pure race anymore. Biracial. Oh yeah, listen, that's a conversation that we're gonna have. Biracial, man. Listen, the NBA and the NFL is fucking taken over by biracials. And it's not a coincidence. So we have to listen. We get side swiped. We get we get, sports, and social media and all this. And I'm not gonna, because social media, it can be used as a great tool, as a great weapon, for us to be able to communicate. And that's going to be a good conversation too. Is social media, a good or a bad thing? I think it's both. It can be a good thing and a bad thing, but it's a good thing to be able to pass off information to people. Not just our people, but to people in general. But the whole human race thing, man, it's whites who don't want that. It's whites who want separatism, who wants everything to be separate because they capitalize. And then mainly, the main issue, the main thing is why whites want separatism, why they want everything separate, why they don't want to intermingle with blacks, because, like I said, their race is already depleting, and if white women were sleeping with black men, by the numbers, white men would start disappearing. That's a fact. That's a fact. No one can't deny that. Even white men can't deny that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a deep conversation, man. I think I don't for now I don't summed it up. Um, I'm normally that on here this late, man, but I had to, and like I said, this conversation is stemming from a video that I put out on Facebook about a young man who was found hung. I believe it was in Mississippi. But new evidence had came out about that case days later. I was getting a lot of flack through messages. I had over 400 and some messages. There were a lot of racial, hateful messages that were coming through. There were a lot of people saying that that it was a video. I went back and did research and looked it up, in which there were another story about the young man may have done this to himself. But the thing is, the racial comments, the monkeys, and if I can show you guys some of the comments that these whites were making, and that's why I came up with this title. And I'm going to change this title too. The question of the title is, why wouldn't most white people want justice for blacks in America? And in the description, I put why. Through what our ancestors went through back even in the slavery days, is most whites that's honest, should want justice, for blacks in America. Why wouldn't you want it? Unless you're evil, your hatred, and you're not for equal justice. And that's it. Because black folks, man, listen, we come from nothing. And that's really what it is. Most blacks come from nothing. We have to work hard at what we do. We have to we're not born with a silver spoon. We have to work hard and we have to make a way. We don't have motherfucking connections in high places to be able to help us navigate through this fucking evil, cruel, racist world. And let's keep it real. Most whites do. They have connection and they have power. To be and let's just think about it. The whole Nolan Wells case, man, it's dealing with a lot of whites with power. That's why. That's why we don't know what happened to this young man thus far, because let's best believe if it was a nigga, if it was a black man, if it was a white boy who died and he was on that boat with a bunch of black men and that island was full of black men, they would have emptied that fucking they would have went to no regard. They damn near would have tried to empty the river out trying to find that white boy or what happened to him. If it was one of their kids, listen, that autopsy report would have been done right. It would have been done efficiently. You wouldn't have had a governor coming out speaking about this case, which he knew nothing about the fucking case. He knew nothing about the autopsy or anything. So like I said, man, they were on code. When he came out and said that let you know that they were on code. He was telling the rest of the whites, throughout that state, we on code. So lock it down. And that's what we have to start practicing, man. We have to get back to greatness. If we were once great, and we talk about that, it's time to stop talking about this shit. And like I said, I need for this shit to get out. so people can see this, talk about this, and we're gonna do more talking about this. I'm not gonna hold you guys up here long. I wasn't planning on being in here this long, but this was a conversation that was needed. And I'm glad you joined the conversation, James. I thank you for your comments. James Sanders also made another comment. He said the last hanging was in Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, there was just another recent hanging with a young black woman. And I have not done a story on that, due to just me being at work. I do work a full-time job, and but I've been trying to put out more content, and I'm going to continue, putting out more content and great content, and probably having more conversations and talks like this. I think this is my niche. I think this is probably what I meant, to come on here on YouTube and talk about, but a lot of these conversations, YouTube and Facebook are not probably going to allow to be put out there like going live, because originally the title, I had to change that because YouTube wouldn't allow me to put what I wanted to put out there on the title, so and these are Facebook, YouTube, and things. All these social media platforms are ran by who? By white folks, so they're not going to allow certain shit to be said or put out. You know what I mean? But they want motherfuckers to use their shit because they capitalize it, and make your money. And that's how shit work. We got to realize that they'll, allow us to say certain shit, but they getting paid for, our content and shit like that, which they'll pay you eventually pennies on the dollar. But, these motherfuckers is making billions at this shit, and they control this shit, and we have to change the, listen, it's going to start with changing the mindsets of our people. We are fucked up as a group of people. We think more materialistic, and that was something I was thinking about too at work the other day. We think more materialistic about, things than we think about trying to build or trying to create, and just come up out of the, the wreckings or the slums that we're from. You have most motherfuckers living in the hood, in the slums, in the projects, walking around with J's on, dressed to kill, but don't have a pot to piss in, a window to throw it out. Our whole mindset is fucked up. Don't get me wrong. I like to dress. I love to dress nice too. I'm a J man. I wear J's too. But I'm not gonna be living in no shit. Or walking or catching the bus, and I'm fresh to death. James Sanders said, send a message telling our people to hang out in groups. Yeah, James, we've been talking about that. We've been talking about this since fucking January, when this epidemic has started. It's an epidemic. And that's what gets me mad about whites. Most whites here in America, they're not, and you do have a lot of white folks that's talking about this shit, but it's the mass of the whites. They don't think that they should talk about this shit. They don't want to talk about it. They're going to continue to be racist, because of what I talked about earlier, James. What Dr. Francis Cress Wilson talked about, white annihilation, and that's what blacks has the ability to do, without even laying a fucking hand on them. So that's why the hatred is so prevalent. That's why the killings are so prevalent. That's why the hangings, the killings, the incarcerations. Because I'm not going to say half, but over 3 million of black men are locked up in prisons. Imagine if those men were out free and they were out here building. That's an army right there. That's a fucking army, and they got over 3 million. I'm going to look up the statistics. Last I counted was over 3 million black men was locked up in prison. That's a fucking small army. Imagine if we had those men out here fucking working and building. And it's not even about trying to kill. Listen, these motherfuckers are killers. They're natural born. Well, that's why you get that movie. They are natural born killers. We are builders and lovers. We are nature's lovers at heart. These motherfuckers are scavengers, natural born killers, because at one point they had to be able to survive. Yeah, but that's a message that I send out all the time, man. Is trying to tell our people to be careful, to be safe. Watch the, and this is one of my quotes: watch the people you're hanging out with, or you can find yourself hanging by yourself. And if you know what that means, James, let me know. And I'll say that again: watch the friends that you're hanging out with, or you can find yourself hanging by yourself. And that's deep, man. So but yeah, man, we're definitely gonna do more shows like this, James. I'm more natural at talking about things like this. Because this is a natural, and I wish I had my homeboy Mar. I wish he was here on the show. This is something that I'm natural talking about because this is something that a lot of information that I'm talking about is just coming from studying and reading and watching different things, getting information, man. I got a lot of information and a lot of knowledge itself that I'm going to speak to our people. And it's about speaking power into your people. Most of the time, man, I've just a lot of shows and videos that I do is just trying to inform our people, on what's going on around the country and sports and all that. But that sports shit, man, that shit is going to be secondhand to what I do. You know what I mean? Because we sports has overtaken, the mindset and really what we should be out here be doing is building. Fuck some sports, and all that. But it really is some bullshit. It's a distraction. It's really what it is. So but we should be out here fucking building and you know, coming up with a plan to coming up with a plan to be able to build and get stronger at what we do. Because like I said, man, we are a third class citizen now. The Mexican has passed the blacks up in the race of what race is going to be dominant. And right now the white race is winning. They're dominating. The Mexican and Latino community has passed the blacks. And that's a shame. But you know I'm not going to say that's a good thing and it's not a bad thing, because they are our brothers and sisters, and they need to realize this shit. That's another conversation that we're going to have too, James. The Mexican and Latinos, these motherfuckers, a lot of these motherfuckers think they white, and they used to vote fucking white until they actually came up, with the Latino Mexican culture, or the actual word, you know, um, so yeah, man, it's a lot of knowledge I'm kicking that a lot of you guys may don't know about, but like I said, I think that's the route that we're gonna go over here, man. We're gonna start trying to speak truth into power, man. And like the title, why wouldn't most whites, like I said, they wouldn't even let me put that in the title, but why wouldn't most whites want justice for blacks in America, with all the bullshit that went on, all the killings, and let's just talk about some of the stuff let's talk about the hatred that these whites have and still got for us. Let's talk about all the evil, cruel shit that they did to our women. You know, um, they were snatching babies out of pregnant women, snatching them out, and displaying this shit in front of everybody. They were setting motherfuckers on fire. We had their whole families out there watching that shit. What sick motherfuckers set a nigga on fire, hang him from a tree or tie him up to a tree while he's alive, set him on fire. They would have their whole families out there, and there's pictures of this shit. And then when they're done, they would take the skin and shit like that. The penis, they would cut the penises off. Men. Shit like that. Horrible shit. They don't teach that shit to their people. But I'm gonna teach that shit to their ass. Now, that's the route that I'm getting ready to go. But I don't understand why we shouldn't have we should have respect, but we should not have fucking what's the word that I'm looking for? We should not fucking forget what happened to our ancestors. These motherfuckers hasn't changed. Because if they in Mississippi with these things with Nolan Wells is showing that they haven't changed and they never will. Because like I said, man, the whole thing it's about what race is going to win the race. And the thing is with whites, they are not going to relinquish their power to anybody. Like I said, they will blow this bitch up. Well, they will release every atomic bomb, throughout the world before they relinquish their power. You know, and that's the truth. You know, so once everybody else realize that shit, you know, that these motherfuckers will do everything, anything necessary to continue their power, and they're flexing their power down there in Mississippi, and that's what's going on. You know, it's about power. You know, and that's what we have to realize. You know, and we have power in numbers, and that's what we don't realize. But they know this shit. They know there's power in numbers. And when it comes to numbers, they don't have the numbers. You know, and that's something that we have to. James Sanders made a comment. He said they would get out of church to invite their communities to public hangings. I know all about that. Yeah, man, that's sick. What type of sick motherfuckers would have their families after church? You know, and like I said, these the same motherfuckers that gave you this Bible, this Jesus, but they was out there hanging your motherfucking ass, hanging your ancestors while their families were out there watching this shit. You know, but these the same motherfuckers that gave you that Bible, that got your ass docile, that gave you Jesus, that you're still waiting for, you know, that's not going to change shit unless we get out there and change it. You know, and that's going to be another conversation that we're going to have. And like I said, man, I don't knock anybody for religion, you know, what they believe in, you know, because at the end of the day, religion does has a place, you know, it does has a good place, you know, when it's used right. You know, put it that way. You know, but you know, we've allowed religion to capture our minds and make us docile. And they was great at that shit. That shit was a plan that was devised. And what's so fucked up, man, is our people, listen, they still don't want to realize that shit. They will believe in some shit to the end. And whites know this shit. That's why they gave us this beautiful fucking story. The story, and it's all a fucking story. And they gave us this beautiful fucking story in a book, and it has captured the mindsets of our people, and it's left us in a docile state to the point where we don't even want to fight no more. We give everything up to Jesus. You know, but they don't. Nigga, they go out and they don't. You can Deuteronomy and all that, you know, and like I said, I don't hate nobody. I'm gonna have to read that. I don't know that scripture by heart, so I don't know what it means. So if you want to come on, we can talk about it. But you know, you got to remember, the Bible was written by a white man. It doesn't have, God is not the author of the Bible. You know, so a lot of stuff that you believe in was given to you by a white motherfucker. Let's just keep it real. You know, and that's and you know, and I don't want to, you know, and I'm not going to put a knock on anybody who believes in religion, you know, but that's what religion has done to our people. They would rather come and say, you know, and give a scripture versus trying to uplift or change the mindsets of our people, you know, because I'm gonna keep it real with you. You know, nothing. I'm not going to say none of those scriptures doesn't do any good for people, but it doesn't do any good for this battle that we're fighting against these racist devils, and that's a fact. You know, because I'm gonna keep it real. It hasn't done anything to change the mindsets of these motherfuckers, and these the motherfuckers who gave you this Deuteronomy shit. I mean, Deuteronomy and all that. Excuse me, and I apologize, but these are the same people who gave you this shit. You reading from some shit that and I don't even know what color or what religion or creed or nothing you is. But if you're black, you reading some shit that your slave masters gave you. You know, it's almost like you can't trust shit that these motherfuckers have gave you or done or anything. You know, we have to really get out the mindset of what we're in now. You know, or we're gonna always be third class citizens. We're not even second class citizens anymore. Yep. So we have to get to the point where we're changing the mind. Because if we don't change the mindsets, we're always going to be where we're at. You know, our greatest, you know, our greatest times will be behind us. Like far as, you know, the kings and the queens and the things that we supposedly once were. You know, meaning because we're allowing another group to dominate us and overrule us and pretty much control everything that we do. If you really want to be real about it. Let me read out a few of these comments. James made a comment. Let me show this. I don't have my glasses on, so a lot of stuff It's hard for me. See, he said, no, damn D, the white man didn't write the Holy Bible. Um, he said they kept rewriting and took it. No, this Bible that you over here reading, the King James version, they did write that. Yep, they did write that. What you're reading, they wrote that. You're not reading no original shit that our ancestors left us. You're reading some shit that the white man wrote and stole and switched around and put his narrative on it. That's it. You know, that's all you're doing. We're reading something that they put their narrative on. The Bible was written by black. I know that part, but that part that we're not reading the Bible that was written by the Hebrews, by the black Hebrews anymore. You're reading the King James version. Most people are, I should say. You know, but yeah, man, if we can get back off into those days, where we were great, man. Like I said, man, we've allowed religion to keep us docile at a docile mind of state, versus trying to win. And that's what religion has done. I'm not going to say religion doesn't has its place, because it does. It keeps society in check, with the consequences that the white man has put with this so-called heaven and hell. But like I said, the consequences is what keeps everyone civilized and keeps this world without chaos. Because just imagine if you didn't have religion, or no one had consequences, nobody feared heaven or hell, which that's going to be another conversation that we're going to have too. You would have total chaos amongst this world. But like I said, man, everything that we go through has been created by a group of people, especially here in the U.S. It's been created by a group of people. They set up a government that's overruling everyone. There's nothing that, and I'm not going to say there's nothing no one can do to change it, because we can change things by laws, but ultimately, and that's going to be another conversation. So I won't go there. I won't try to discourage, but we definitely need to get out and change the voting demographics of what's been going on through this country. Most of us try to get away from jury duty, and as we see that hurt that Carmelo Anthony trial, he should have been judged by his peers. And what I mean by peers is people who look like him. And what they mean by peers is just the people in his area, basically. But look, man, it's been an hour and 30 minutes. I just want to come on here for a short second. I definitely, didn't think I was going to be on this long. But yeah, man, like I said, James, I was just sitting here, going through a lot of these videos that I was just sitting up here watching. I'm like, oh man, so you got to ask yourself this question: why don't most? And I'll just say most people, and I'll just say all the other races too, because you do have a lot of other races that hate on African Americans and blacks. Right now you have the Asian community up and roar against the black community when we have done nothing but support them and brought them to the point where, majority of them that's in the community, I'm not going to say they're rich, but they're well off than what they were before they were set up with these businesses in our communities, and they don't give us the respect that they fucking should. And we got to start closing these motherfucking restaurants down. That's in our black communities. That's not black. We got to start doing that, man. That's going to take a lot of power back that we used to have in our communities. So without that, without a community, man, you don't have anything. We don't even have neighborhoods at all. We don't even have any communities anymore in the black neighborhood. And that's real talk. A community refers to people owning property, taking care of their land, their communities, their children. We don't have that shit no more, because of the crack era. And just look at the environment in Detroit. It's gotten a lot better, but what the crack era, and I'm gonna get back to this, and I'm gonna go in and close out. What the crack era and the music industry, what this rap music, this gangster rap, and now you got this drill rap. It's totally destroyed the community, wiped out millions Millions of lives have been taken. Millions of lives has been affected through music alone. And music should, and at one point, the music that our people used to listen to were uplifting jazz, rock and roll, and things like that. We were not degrading our women. We were not degrading our men. We were not talking about killing niggas and sticks and all this shit. Now, anytime you listen to any of this rap music, the only thing that they're really talking about is drugs, killing one another, and things like that. And what's so crazy, this shit don't affect the white communities like how it do. And that's what happened with the crack in the music industry. And like I said, man, we're gonna do more show. We're gonna have a conversation about how we need to have black lawyers coming up with some type of plan to be able to get to sue the government, man, because the government has a hand in the downfall of everything that went on through the crack and through the rap industry that changed the mindsets of a group of people that was not like that. We was damn near like motherfucking, what do you call the people that be building shit? But we had a little bit more swag to us, but we damn near were like I'm about to think of what do you call them now? The people that be with the hats and that be building stuff, the Amish. We were almost kind of like Amish people, upright citizens that, that fear God and that were builders. You see what I'm saying? We wasn't out here on no rap, this shit that we on now, motherfucker, like just the whole rap industry, the mindset, the things that we talk about. That rap shit doesn't help anybody out besides the rappers. That's it. In the music industry, the motherfuckers who actually running it. It's not doing anything for the masses of the people. It's actually destroying the masses. It's destroying our youth, and it's destroyed most of the adults, my age or less. Because I grew up in a rap. I still listen to rap music, but the difference between me and most people is I understand that rap is just music. They're trying to portray shit. And what the youth don't understand is these motherfuckers are not, well, I'll take that back. Back in the days, it was just talk and just talking about, it was just all talk, but now these motherfuckers are actually living their lyrics now. They actually out here doing what the fuck they saying. And that right there alone has just, like I said, wiped out millions of our people that could have been out here building. Just think of all our young black men that's locked up in prison. Just think what we could be doing with those young men that's locked up. Like I said, at one point, I don't know the exact statistics, but at one point there were over 3 million black men locked up throughout the United States in the prison system. Imagine if we had all those men out here building. What our communities would look like, what the families would look like, because right now we don't even have families. We just have mothers with kids and baby fathers. That's it. You don't have families, and that's what they've done. They took away the fucking black family, and that was the most ultimate prize, most sacred thing that we had coming out of slavery was the black family. And they knew that shit. They knew that the black family was strong. We were building, we were builders, and they systematically destroyed that shit through drugs and through crack. Like I said, we need to have a group of lawyers coming up with a plan to be able to figure out who's responsible for this shit. What part of the government is responsible for destroying a group of people, the mindset, because like I said, we damn near was like Amish people coming out of slavery. We just had a little bit more swag to us, but we were uplifting, upstanding citizens, because most blacks back in that time feared, what would happen to them if they were, if they were behaving like how we behave now. Imagine living in those times and trying to do the shit that we see our men and women doing. So this should let you know, man, that everything that you see going on today in America with the black community, with the black family, has been systematically done. It's wiped away. There's no more black family. I'm not saying that there's not families out here, but you know, as a whole, the black family, they don't even portray black families in the media no more. Like when they show the black family on TV or a commercial, they'll show a mother and kids. That's not a family. If there is not a father in that home, that's not a family. That's just a mother with kids. That's it. You know, and we gotta recognize this shit. You know, we be faking this shit. You know, we gotta keep it real with ourselves. That is not a family. You know, a mother with kids is just a mother with motherfucking kids who didn't have a husband who didn't do it correctly. You know, and I'm not knocking no one about that. You know, we got to get back to the mindsets where, you know, where we were not having kids out of wedlock, where we were having families. You know, like I said, all this shit that's going on through with Black America, through the black communities, was planned. You know, we need to have a group of lawyers trying to figure out who gonna be responsible for this shit. You know, so look, man, I'm not gonna hold you guys up. And look, I need for you guys to make sure you hitting that motherfucking, make sure you guys hitting that subscribe button, man. I apologize. You know, it's been a deep, heated conversation talking about, you know, a lot of this racism and just everything that we've been talking about, man. It's definitely been, you know, a great conversation, but I need for you guys to make sure that you're subscribing, you're liking, and you're sharing. You know, most of all, make sure that you guys are liking, you're sharing, because when you like and share, this keep me prevalent in the YouTube algorithm, and that's what it's about, man. You know, if we not in an algorithm, a lot of these videos and a lot of content that I'm putting out won't get out to the masses of the people, to the masses of the people. So we need to get this information out to the masses of the people. So what I need for you guys to do is making sure that y'all sharing this and y'all hitting that like button, you know, because that's what YouTube is a machine. You know, they go on for algorithms and things like that. You know, so but I want to thank everybody, man, who came onto the show. I want to thank James Sanders, man. I thank you again, man. You always there. You always give me your input. You always give me your comments. And uh, at Lamar, the real Israel, man. I would love to have a conversation about you. I don't know if you're still on, but we're definitely going to do more shows and get. We're going to talk about the aspects of religion, man. You know, I know, you know, and James, I know a lot of I know a lot of stuff that's in the Bible comes from our people, you know, but it's been taken, it's been rewritten, and it's been spent around. You know, so a lot of stuff that our people put out for information out for us, it's not there. We got to go find the original information that our people put out. You know, not saying that everything in there is not doesn't have a benefit, because most of the stuff does has a benefit. You know, you just have to apply what applied to you and to your life, and you know, go from there. You know, but look, man, again, I want to thank everybody who made a comment on the show. It was a great conversation. Like I said, James, you know, this is I think this is you know, this is something that we're gonna, you know, continue to talk about. And I think this is the route that we're gonna you know, we need to head to, man, because we need to have more people than in the community, you know, and I'm not Dr. Umar Johnson, nothing like that, man. I'm not trying to portray anything like that. You know, I'm just regular Dame D from the What Up Though show, and I'm gonna kick this knowledge to my peoples, man. You know, because we definitely need it, man. You know, James Sanders made a comment. He said, "Thanks for sharing the message as well." It's all for sure, man. Listen, that's my job. That's my duty, is to be able to come on here and share a message. You know, I think going forward, man, you know, like I said, I'm gonna have more conversations, more talks like this. You know, you know, and don't get me wrong, man. I love sports. I love my Detroit, everything, you know, but really, man, that shit is really secondary to really what's going on here in life, man. We need to really I want to focus on trying to change the mindset and uplift our peoples. That's what I'm on, man. You know, and that's what everybody should be on. You know, so look, I want to thank you again, James, man. We've been on here for an hour and 43 minutes, so basically 2 hours. But you know, it was all worth it. It was well worth coming on here, chopping it up, putting out the information. You know, so look, I need you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Make sure you're hitting that share button. Make sure you're hitting that like button so this content can get out there, so we can stay in the YouTube algorithm. But it's another one. It's your boy Dame D, and I am out. Peace.